Also, if you'd like to, everybody should be muted right now, and I ask that you stay muted for most of this lesson. But if you have a question, you'd like to ask a question, you can do that by clicking on the, by raising your hand. Please click on the participant icon at the bottom, and then you can click on the raise hand icon on that pop-up box. Or if you're on a mobile device, you can do that by clicking the more icon in the bottom right hand corner and then choosing the raise hand option. So today our objectives, we're going to be talking about time management. We're going to start by discussing the importance of time management. Excuse me. What it means, how it can benefit us, how it can cause problems if ignored or not properly done. Then we're going to identify some of the time management personality types. And most importantly, we'll learn some essential time management techniques. So the definition of time management, time management is the process of planning, exercising conscious control of time spent on specific activities, especially to increase effectiveness, efficiency, and productivity. It often involves a juggling act of various demands on a person related to work, social life, family, hobbies, personal interests, and commitments. So when I look at when I read that, I think the word that sticks out as most important maybe to me is conscious. I know a lot of times as humans, we find ourselves just sometimes doing things on autopilot, maybe it's just the way you've always done something, or maybe that's the way somebody told you it should be done, or maybe it's just human instinct to do things a certain way just because that's the first thing we think of. A good example of this is a couple weeks ago, my wife decided she wanted to remulch some flower beds in our backyard. Well, she decided she wanted me to remulch some flower beds in our backyard. So we went to Lowe's, got about 30 bags of mulch, came home, parked in the driveway like I usually do. Well, actually, then I came inside because I was going to take a break and get mentally prepared to do this. And when I was putting this presentation together, I researched, that taking breaks is very important. It'll help increase your efficiency and reduce stress. So I was taking my break, and then my wife came in and asked me what I was doing. I explained all that to her. She said that I should do some research on getting myself up and getting out there and getting the mulch spread. So that's what I did. I went to the truck and I started carrying the bags to the backyard. And I carried about 4 or 5 bags, and I realized that this was taking a lot more effort than I really wanted to put in. So I stopped for a minute and thought, oh, well, I'll just go get my wheelbarrow, and I'll load the wheelbarrow down and I'll wheel them into the backyard. So, my point in the story is that because I took that few minutes of time to stop and think and be conscious of what I was doing, it saved me a lot of time and effort in that project. So we always want to make sure we're conscious in the planning and the execution of the tasks or activities that we're doing, and that'll help us better manage our time. So why do we need to manage our time? Clearly, just like with that story, managing your time will help you to save time. But we really can't. You can't save time because time is not a constant thing. It doesn't change or it doesn't vary. But what we can do is save some time on one task to use completing another task. And eventually that time will add up to more free time, hopefully, which is what all of us want, or it will allow us to complete more tasks in less time and be more efficient in doing so. Properly manage our time will also greatly reduce our stress. When you manage your time wisely, you feel like you're in control of your time and your life. It doesn't feel like everything's a rush, everything's hectic, everything's chaotic. So if you do that, it'll make you feel a lot more calm, and it'll reduce your stress. And we'll talk about some ways to do that in a few minutes. Time management can also help us function more effectively, and in turn will increase our work output. So just like proper time management has positive effects, negative time management tends to have negative effects. One of the most detrimental of those can be missing deadlines, which is usually a result of procrastination. And procrastination is something I know personally I deal with. I think a lot of people deal with it. And it's one of the most common habits that people with poor time management skills actually have. Science has actually shown that procrastination is a result of something that happens in the brain. It's called time inconsistency. So what that refers to is the tendency for our brains to value immediate rewards more highly than future rewards. So the best way to understand really what that means is to imagine that you have two selves basically. You have your present self and you got your future self. So when you set goals or timelines, you're making plans for your future self. You're envisioning kind of what you want your life to look like in the future. And at the time when we set those goals and timelines, they temporarily satisfy our brains. They give us that instant gratification that, okay, we just did something and that feels good. I've got a plan for it now. But unfortunately, what happens is when it comes time to execute the steps that are required to achieve that goal, a lot of times we find that those steps are not very rewarding. They're uncomfortable. They require more effort than we're willing to put in at the time. So that's where the procrastination comes from. There's no instant gratification when we're going through those steps that we don't enjoy, or we're uncomfortable doing. So that causes us to put them off. But the best way to kind of overcome that is always to revert back to what your original goal or your timeline was, and also to consider how procrastinating can affect, obviously deadlines, but also how it can affect others, how it affects you, how it may affect your family, or how it may affect your reputation. Another thing is, again, stress. When things are chaotic, when we're always behind schedule, we don't ever have enough time, that makes our life feel unmanaged. It makes us feel out of control. So that's going to reduce the amount of stress that you have at work and also at home. A long-lasting effect of poor time management can be a negative impact to your reputation. An important thing to remember is, an employer or a supervisor they're gonna recognize if you took 2 hours to complete a task that should have taken 30 minutes. And over time, if an employer continues to see that, that's gonna affect their impression of you, what they think of you. And that can lead to a lot of negative things. It can lead to, negative performance reviews or write-ups, or in the worst case, maybe termination. You also want to think about what that could do to your future employment opportunities. If you create a negative impression on a current employer, that may most likely affect their likelihood of giving you a positive reference in the future. And poor time management will also most definitely affect the scale of work-life balance in our lives. If we're constantly running behind on things, if we're overloaded with work, that may result in, we might have to come to work early, we might have to work late, we might have to work on the weekends. You might be so behind on stuff that even when you're not at work, you can't do anything but think about work because you're so behind and you're worried about how you're going to get this done or how you're going to get that done. And if that's the case, that's going to definitely result in a lot of lost time with, your family, your friends, or just the time that you might have to relax and have fun. But these are just a few of the examples that the positive and negative effects time management may have on your life. A little later, we're going to talk about right now we're going to talk about the different time management personality types. So those effects may be different depending on what your personality type is. Commonly, there's typically most people say there's 6 different types of personality types. There's a lot of different articles and stuff you can read. They may have 4, they may have 7, but most of the stuff that you're going to see is going to have 6 different personality types. And once you identify with your personality type, that's going to help you better manage your time. And remember, when we're going through these, you might just align with one of them, or you might have behaviors or attributes that relate to multiple personality types. The first type we'll talk about is the firefighter. The firefighter is the type of person who is always running towards a crisis, like when others are running away. Firefighters, they hate wasting time. They think there's no better time than right now. They usually never put things off. And while that might be a good thing, while jumping to action right away may usually seem like a good thing, it may tend to give minor issues that come up a greater sense of urgency, which can lead to some negative effects on how you manage your time. One of the best things you could do if you're this type of personality is to identify and to prioritize your tasks by their urgency and importance. And that'll help you better manage your tasks and the work that you have to get done. The next type is the multitasker. Multitaskers believe they can juggle multiple things at once. They honestly believe they can bounce from one task to another task and back to that task quickly and efficiently, and that they're going to be able to cross those items off and to get everything done faster. Unfortunately, this usually leads to a lot of incomplete tasks or mistakes, and more than likely less will get accomplished in the same amount of time. So the solution for multitasking is actually to single task. You should make sure that you give one specific task your full attention and ensure that you finish that task before moving on to something else. Try to set aside some blocks of time for essential things that you have to do. And during this time, make sure you eliminate any and all distractions that may pull you to another task, such as your cell phone or checking your email or answering phone calls, stuff like that, that may lead you to get sidetracked very easily. The next type is the overcommitter. The overcommitter is a person who doesn't really know how to say no. They're like a yes man or woman, and they have trouble establishing boundaries. So as a result, they're continually putting other people's needs or priorities ahead of their own. Besides not having time to attend to their own commitments, they commit to others, and they often burn themselves out, from stress or exhaustion or just trying to make everybody else happy. There's only so much one person can do in a day. The solution to this type is to stop saying yes, even though sometimes you can't tell certain people no. Sometimes that's out of our control, but most of the time, the time issues that we have around time management are self-imposed. So it's something that can easily be remedied. You should try to identify what's important in your life, at work and at home, and then consider what's important to you before you accept anybody else's request or anybody else's tasks that you can. Like I said, we all know that sometimes there's certain things you can't say no to, but there are other things that even an employer will respect you more for if you just say, look, I really don't have time to do that right now. I wish I could, but I have to get all this other stuff done. And they'll most times recognize that you're prioritizing what you need to do and you're getting your job done. The next type is the underestimator. So the underestimator is always the person that says stuff like, you know, hey, this will only take a minute. Let me go do this real quick. And then the next thing you know, you've spent hours on something you thought would take a few minutes. At first, you know, it might seem like that's not a real problem, but eventually all that underestimating of time pushes everything back, and other commitments or tasks that you have planned get ignored, or deadlines get missed, and things like that. The solution to this personality type is to realize that obviously things take longer than planned. Start by trying to block out extra time in your calendar. If you think something may only take an hour, then block out an hour and a half or 2 hours if you can do that. Usually you'll find that that gives you more than enough time to complete the task. Another thing you could consider doing is to review past assignments if you've done the same type task, or time logs, calendars. Use those types of tools to analyze how long it's taking you to do that in the past, and that'll help you do it better in the future. The next type is the perfectionist. There's a big difference in giving 110% and being overly obsessed about how you cross every T and dot every I. You know, eventually, because you're obsessed with perfection, you'll end up spending way too much time on one specific task. So the solution to this is maybe one of the hardest, but you have to try to overcome your perfectionism. You know, start by reevaluating your standards. Ask yourself if your standards are too high, or if you or others can even meet these standards. Do your rules that you have about yourself, do they help you achieve your goal, or are they getting in your way? You know, if you can say yes to any of those, then try to start setting more realistic goals and expectations of yourself. And then the last personality type is the procrastinator. So the procrastinator is usually indecisive. They're the type of people that get a thrill out of pushing things off until the last minute. They always wait till the last minute to do everything. Some people will even tell you that their procrastination is beneficial, that it helps them, they work better under pressure, that procrastinating helps them be more efficient. It reduces the unnecessary efforts that may come up while completing a task, or, you know, it gives them more time to think about it. You know, those are some of the things that people say to justify procrastination. But there are a lot of significant costs to procrastination. It can lead to, you know, even health problems. It can lead to a weakened immune system and even insomnia, because you're always worrying about things. When you're at the last minute, you know you can't get it done. It can also damage, you know, your relationships and your reputation. The best way to solve this problem for people who procrastinate is to just get started. A lot of times the hardest part is to get going. So what you want to try to do is the first thing, maybe get started by breaking things down into smaller chunks if you can, you know, make one task into subtasks and stuff like that. You'll notice that once you get started doing something, it's a whole lot easier to keep going. So those are the personality types. And like I said, once you've identified your personality type, it's important to start developing some new habits and techniques to help you improve your time management skills. But based on your personality style, you may already possess some of the habits that are necessary. Oh, sorry, I went too fast. You may already possess some of these techniques that are essential to time management, and you may realize that based on your personality, you need to spend some more time developing some of these new habits. So the first essential technique to time management is making to-do lists and prioritizing tasks. This technique it's effective to time management, and it's also one of the most important things you can do in your personal and professional life to reduce stress and to make sure that things are getting done in a timely manner. When you prioritize things, you make sure that the most important things are finished first. Now, what you want to do is, start with a to-do list, write down every single task that you have to do in a day, no matter how small it may seem or no matter how big it may seem. Make sure that you write everything that you have to do in the day on your to-do list. Once you write it, just write everything down first. You don't have to start prioritizing anything yet. Just make sure you write everything down first. And then once you've got all those tasks on your to-do list, then you can start to determine the importance of those tasks or the priority level. You want to start with obviously the top priority, where you can classify those as like A level or level 1. So these are things that will lead to significant consequences if you don't do them today. These are going to be things like scheduled meetings or trainings that you have to do, tasks that you've been directly told have to be completed at a certain time. Make sure you put those as the top priority on your list. And then you want to prioritize things in lower levels, however many you want. You can have, just level A, B, and C, or you can have level A, B, C, D, however you want to do it. But just prioritize them out so that you know that the most important things are going to have consequences. The middle of the road type priorities are going to be things that might have, a mildly negative consequence if not completed today. And then, bottom level are things that will have no penalty or no consequence if they're not completed today, or things that you can totally eliminate. So once you prioritize those into those groups, then you want to go into each of those groups and prioritize. If you have 6 A-level priorities, then you go in and rank those 1 through 6. That'll really help you keep track of what you're having to do and keep track of what is the most important thing you need to do throughout the day. Another very important thing, a habit to try to develop in yourself, is the ability to eliminate some distractions. Eliminating distractions is one of the most effective ways, I know for me personally, to get more things done. I get easily distracted sometimes, and once I do that, my mind starts going in a bunch of different directions. Studies have also shown that in the United States, U.S. workers, they waste up to 25% of their time at work on social media or smartphone apps. So consider turning your phone off, or turning your notifications off, or putting your phone in a place where you can't reach it while you're working. I know that's not always possible. You can also maybe set some times throughout the day that you want to get your phone out and check, whatever you want to check, profiles or other things like that. But try to eliminate the distractions of electronic devices, cell phones and stuff like that. That's one of the biggest wasters of time. The next thing, I think this is my most favorite one, taking breaks. It's important in any line of work. Taking breaks, this is going to always give you a opportunity to gain a new perspective on what you're doing. If your head's always down in your work, you're working hard, you're out on a project site, whatever the case may be, you might not be aware of what's going on around you. Priorities or the goals of the project may have changed since you started the work. Maybe you need to take that time to the entire crew get back together so you can, you know, take a step back and look at the bigger picture of what's got to be done. Maybe you'll find easier, better, more efficient ways to do that. Taking breaks is also provides a time for you to recharge and refocus. You know, everybody needs time to relax, to stretch it out, drink some water, or eventually your energy will bottom out. And a lot of the work that I know you guys are doing is very labor intensive. So you always want to use those breaks to obviously hydrate, to maybe drink some Gatorade or replace some electrolytes, eat something salty, stuff like that. The next essential would be to, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, was to break large tasks into subtasks. This will make your tasks seem more manageable. When you, and you also want to find what your most productive time throughout the day is. Some people are more productive in the morning, and other people are more productive in the afternoon. So just try to find what time of the day works best for you, and try to complete your most urgent or high priority tasks during that most productive time for you. You also want to always focus on the end result. You know, what's your goal? What is it you want to achieve? Start by giving that goal clarity. Maybe try to visualize it in your head. And once you've kind of visualized it, you know, write out the steps that it's going to take you to get to that goal. Most people write a goal, but they never really plan the steps, or they make the steps seem unmanageable. So if you write these action steps in smaller increments, that's going to motivate you to achieve them. And always make sure you're keeping your eye on the prize. You know, if whatever your goal is, just continue to focus on that and break it down into smaller chunks, and it'll be a lot more manageable. Eliminating indecision. A lot of times the the fear of making decisions can lead to a lot of lost time and delays. You got to remember that decisions have to be made, and somebody has to make them. If a decision has been entrusted to you, if somebody said you're the person to make that decision, then just weigh your options and make a decision. It's easy to second guess ourselves and worry if this is the right decision or what's going to happen. I've found that it's a lot better to just make the best decision that you can and own that decision. You know, if it's right, it's right. If it's wrong, then it's wrong. Sorry, I made a decision, and move on from it. You know, if time allows, obviously, if time allows and when appropriate, you know, consult with a supervisor or your team if you're afraid to make a decision on your own. The next thing is to effectively manage your time. You know, the first thing that we have to do is we got to know where our time goes. You can't really rely on your memory. It's easy to think, yeah, sure, I can remember what I did today, but tomorrow you'll forget some of the stuff you did today, and the next day you'll forget more of the stuff you did today. So the best thing you can do is try to keep a time log. At first, you know, this will probably seem a little foolish, might maybe seem like a waste of time, but if you literally there's a lot of resources, there's a lot of examples of these on, you know, you can just Google, you can search, you know, time log on Google. There's a lot of good templates you can use, but if you start to really track your time, you'll be able to see that where you are wasting time or where you can more efficiently use your time. And if we want to manage our time, we obviously have to know where it's going. So those are some of the essential habits. Once you, like I said, once you've identified your personality type, then you want to start developing some of these new habits that will complement your personality type. That is the end of my presentation. I found a good little TED Talk. This is this he's really good. This is kind of gets a little deep, so just try to keep open mind and really think about what this guy's saying, because it really makes a lot of sense to me, and I'm sure it will to you as well. You can't hear it, can you?
Can't hear it, Daniel.
What do I got to do?
Before you share your screen, it should be an option at the bottom that you could check.
It says use computer sound.
Yeah. Share computer sound.
That's it.
Thank you.
You may have thought that we started late, but it is ironic that the first speaker would be the author of the book, Procrastinate on Purpose. How is it that we have more tips and tricks, tools and technology, calendars and checklists than ever before, and yet we still always seem to be behind? How is it that we work longer hours? We're moving faster than we've ever moved in history, and yet we never seem to be caught up? How is it that we know more about time management today, and yet stress is at an all-time high? The reason why is because everything you know about time management is wrong. I first started to realize this a couple years ago. It was early on a Saturday morning. I was at my business partner's house, and I was picking him up for a very important international leader planning retreat. And he has this 2-year-old baby girl named Haven. And Haven is the sweetest little thing you can imagine. She has curly brown hair and these sweet, soft brown eyes. And we live in Nashville, so she has a little southern accent that's developing. And as I'm picking up Dustin and we're about to leave, Haven comes sprinting down the hallway. And she leaps and she latches on to Dustin's leg. And she says, "Daddy, where are you going?" And he looks down at her and he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, baby Haven. Daddy actually has to go to work today." And she looks up at him and her eyes well up with tears. And she says, "No, Daddy. Please, no work today. No work, Daddy." And in that moment, I realized two things. The first is that I myself am not ready to have kids just yet. The second is that even though everything that you've ever heard about time management is all logical, tips and tricks, tools and technology, calendars and checklists, it's apps, it's all logic. What I realized in that moment from a 2-year-old is that today time management is no longer just logical. Today, time management is emotional. And how our feelings of guilt and fear and worry and anxiety and frustration, those things dictate how we choose to spend our time as much as anything that's in our calendar or on our to-do list. In fact, there is no such thing as time management. You can't manage time. Time continues on whether we like it or not. So there is no such thing as time management. Really, there is only self-management. Well, that was the first big realization that I had. In order for you to understand the second, I wanted to take you on a quick history of time management theory. And that really began in the late 50s and 60s. And it came during the Industrial Revolution. And early time management thought was all about, it was one-dimensional. And it was all based on efficiency. And the idea with efficiency was that if we could develop tools and technology to help us do things faster, then theoretically that would give us more time. Well, there's nothing wrong with efficiency. All things being equal, efficiency is better. And yet, there is an unfortunate limitation to efficiency as a strategy for time management. And it's evidenced very well by the fact that we all carry around miniature computers in our pockets, and yet somehow we're still never caught up. Well, in the late 80s, Era 2 time management thinking emerged. I feel like it was pretty much single-handedly ushered in by the late, great Dr. Stephen Covey. And Dr. Covey introduced what we are referring to as two-dimensional thinking. He gave us something called the time management matrix, where the x-axis was urgency and the y-axis was importance. And the beauty about this was that it gave us a system for scoring our tasks. And then based on how they scored in these two areas, we could prioritize tasks one in front of the other. Prioritizing is all about focusing first on what matters most. And for the last 20 years, this has really been the pervasive mode of thinking as it relates to time management theory. And it's not that there's anything wrong with prioritizing. In fact, prioritizing is as valuable a skill today as it ever has been in history. And yet, even though we throw that word around like it's the end-all be-all to time management theory, right? We say, get your priorities in order. Or it's just, you don't have the right priorities. Well, unfortunately, maybe that's not really the case. Because there is a massive limitation to prioritizing that nobody ever talks about, and that is this. There's nothing about prioritizing that creates more time. All prioritizing does is take item number 7 on your to-do list and it bumps it up to number 1, which is valuable in and of itself, but it doesn't do anything inherently to create more time, and it does nothing to help you accomplish the other items on your to-do list. I mean, if you think about efficiency is kind of like running on a hamster wheel. And if you think of prioritizing, it's really about borrowing time from one activity to spend on another. It's kind of like juggling. And that really describes the way that we even talk about time. I'm juggling a lot, or I'm trying to balance a lot. And in that paradigm, there's only two strategies. One is to do things faster or to do more things. And that is what the world kind of feels like, right? How does it feel to know that really all we are is a bunch of juggling hamsters sprinting towards an inevitable crash landing? You cannot solve today's time management problems with yesterday's time management thinking. What we've noticed is the emergence of a new type of thinker, somebody that we refer to as a multiplier. And multipliers use what we call three-dimensional thinking. While most people only make decisions based on urgency and importance, multipliers are making a third calculation which is based on significance. And if urgency is how soon does something matter, and importance is how much does it matter, then significance is how long is it going to matter. It's a completely different paradigm. It's adding on to what is there. It's in with the old, but it's also in with the new. Because most of us, if you think about the modern day to-do list, which is one of the key strategies or tools that we have, we ask ourselves, when we assemble our to-do list, we say, what's the most important thing I can do today? But that is not how multipliers think. Multipliers instead ask the question, what can I do today that would make tomorrow better? What can I do right now that would make the future better? They're making the significance calculation. See, when I say multiply your time, that might sound a little bit superfluous. It might sound like an over-exaggeration, but it really is not. Now, while it is true that we all have the same amount of time inside of one day, 24 hours, 1,440 minutes, 86,400 seconds. And there's nothing that any of us can do to create more time in one day, but that's exactly the problem. That type of thinking is the problem. What we have to do is break out of that paradigm and instead think about tomorrow. And that brings us to the premise for how you multiply time. The way that you multiply time is simple. You multiply your time by giving yourself the emotional permission to spend time on things today that give you more time tomorrow. That's the significance calculation. You multiply time by giving yourself the emotional permission to spend time on things today that create more time tomorrow. The significance calculation changes everything. The focus funnel is our attempt to create a visual depiction that codifies the thought process that multipliers go through in their head unconsciously when they are evaluating how to spend their time. It's why some people create extraordinary, explosive, exponential results, and other people seem to kind of just create linear traction. And it works like this. If your tasks all come into the top of the funnel, the first question a multiplier asks is, can I eliminate this? Is it even worth doing? It's another example how everything you know about time management is wrong, or at least that it has changed, because most of us use to-do lists, and multipliers realize that next generation time management has much more to do with what you don't do than what you do. Time multipliers realize that perfection is achieved not only when nothing more can be added, but when nothing more can be taken away. It is the permission to ignore. Because anything that we say no to today creates more time for us tomorrow. The challenge emotionally is that we struggle with guilt, and we struggle with wanting to say no, but really feeling like we have to say yes. And so we go through life trying to never say no. And in one of the interviews I conducted with the multiplier, they said something that changed my life. They said, Rory, it's futile to go through life trying to never say no. What you have to realize is that you are always saying no to something. Because anytime you say yes to one thing, you are simultaneously saying no to an infinite number of others. If you can't eliminate the task, the next question is, can I automate the task? Anything that I create a process for today saves me time tomorrow. It's like setting up online bill pay. I never have 2 hours in my day to set up online bill pay. I just don't have time. And if I had 2 hours in my day, I would never use it to set up online bill pay. But a multiplier realizes that if I save 30 minutes a month from paying my bills by setting up online bill pay, then it makes sense to invest those 2 hours, because then after just 4 months' time, I will have broken even on that investment. And every month thereafter, I will get something we call ROTI, return on time invested. Automation is to your time exactly what compounding interest is to your money. Just like compounding interest takes money and it makes money into more money, automation takes time and it makes it into more time. The way that wealthy people think about money is exactly the same way that multipliers think about time, and they give themselves the permission to invest the time and energy to automate the process. If it can't be automated, then the next question is, can it be delegated? Can I teach someone else how to do this? I'm reminded of a time when I was 7 years old, and I'll never forget, I was in the car with my mom, and I hit her with this question. I said, Mom, do I have a dad? And as you might imagine, that was a pretty difficult question for a single mother to navigate with her 7-year-old. And it was the first time that my mom told me her life story. She was pregnant at 17, divorced a couple years later, pregnant again at 22, and then she was divorced from my biological father 6 months after I was born. So there she was, 22 years old, single mom, no high school education. And she explained to me, she said, Rory, I decided at that point that I would never have a man in my life because I haven't had good luck with men. And we may not have a lot, and we may not have a dad, but we're going to have love. And so we went back and forth for a little while, and I said, well, you know, Mom, I love our family. I really do. I love our family, but I think it would be really cool to have a dad. And so she said, well, I'll tell you what, honey, if you want a dad, then why don't you go out and find yourself a good dad? What kind of crap is that? It just so happened that that was my first day at a new Shaolin Kung Fu center, and I had been studying martial arts since I was 5, and so they put me in this all-adult school to be a little more advanced. And there was another gentleman who walked in. It was his first day also, but this guy was much older than me. He had long hair and tattoos all up and down his arm and leather jacket, and he came in on a motorcycle. And this guy was about the scariest dude you can imagine if you're 7 years old, and he gets paired up as my sparring partner. His name was Kevin. He turned out to be pretty nice. Well, we started to advance through the belt levels together, and so Kevin started bringing me home from class every once in a while. Then before you know it, Kevin came over on the weekends, and we would practice our forms. And then we caught a movie, and then before long, Mom came with us to the movies, and so it was the 3 of us that were going to movies together. And I'll never forget the first time the 2 of them went to a movie without me. Well, as it turns out, Kevin and I tested for our black belts together on the same day when I was 10 years old. They got married 2 weeks later. A couple years after that, Kevin adopted me, and I changed my last name from Rory McLaughlin to Rory Vaden, and they have been married for 20 years ever since. And the point of that story is that you can delegate anything. But if you ask the average person, you said, are there things you know you could be delegating to somebody else? We would say yes. But then you say, well, why don't you train someone else to do it? And what most of us would say is we say, well, because they just can't do it as well as I can. And that may be true once, maybe twice, but it is only true absent the significance calculation. Because if you think longer term, you realize they'll be able to master the task just like you were. Significance changes everything. It's how you multiply your time. It's giving yourself the permission of imperfect for a little while, because over time they'll be able to figure it out. Now, if you can't automate or delegate a task, that task drops out the bottom of the funnel, and at that point there's only one remaining question, and that question is, should I do this task now? Must it be done now, or can it wait until later? If the task must be done now, then that's what we call concentrate. It's the permission to protect. All right, the permission to protect. It's all about focus and eliminating distractions. And honestly, there's nothing all that exciting or new there. However, if you ask the question, can this wait until later? And you decide that the answer is yes, then that's not eliminate, automate, or delegate. That is what we call procrastinate on purpose. Procrastinate on purpose. Now, you're not going to procrastinate on it forever. You're going to pop that activity back to the top of the funnel, at which point it will enter into a holding pattern where it will cycle through the focus funnel until inevitably, one day, eventually, one of the other 4 strategies will be executed on whatever that task is. And what you find is that if something can continually wait, often what happens is you eventually develop the courage to do what you should have done in the first place, which was eliminate it. Or you discover a system for how to automate it, or someone rises up to the call of leadership. They rise up to the occasion, and it ends up being delegated. Or it ends up becoming something that is significant enough for you to spend your time on. A lot of people say, well, Rory, wait a minute. In the Take the Stairs book, right? In Take the Stairs, you said procrastination was the killer of all success. You said procrastination was the most expensive invisible cost in business today. You said procrastination is the foundation of all mediocrity. And now you're telling us to procrastinate on purpose? And yes, that is what I said, and it's exactly true how I said it. But there's a major distinction to realize, and that is there's a difference in procrastinating. There's a difference in waiting to do something that we know we should be doing that we don't feel like doing, versus waiting to do something because we're deciding that now is not the right time. Waiting to do something that we know we should do but we don't feel like doing, that's procrastination. That's the killer of all success. But waiting to do something because we're deciding intentionally that now's not the right time, that isn't procrastination. That isn't the killer of success, that's a virtue. And it's an art form that the world really needs, which is patience. The patience to put off the insignificant things, like checking email 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You multiply your time by giving yourself the emotional permission to spend time on things today that create more time tomorrow. And regardless of your religious affiliation or your spiritual beliefs, hopefully you'll have an appreciation for the way that Scripture says the world was created. And in Genesis, God has created this perfect world. And it says something amazing, that we're created in His image. And then in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, He gives the first command to all of humanity. And what is that command? Thou shalt have no other gods before me? No. Is it love thy neighbor as thyself? No. God's first command to all of humanity, be fruitful and multiply. Thank you very much.
Can y'all hear me now? I don't know how the audio works. Oh, all right. That pretty much wraps it up. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Anything they want to share?
There's a statement in the chat box. I don't know if you want to.
Seems like people might be different personally. Yeah, where did Austin go? He left? Oh, there he is. What do you mean, man? You mean different than the ones that I talked about?
No, I just meant that, like, depending on what the task is, some people might, you know, be more
Oh,
of a
yeah.
firefighter or more of a procrastinator, and depending on the subject.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think you have to, yeah, your personality could differ depending on, if, I mean, there are certain things that I really like to do. You know what I mean? So when those types of things come up, I'm going to be the firefighter. I'll be the one running towards it and starting right off the get-go, versus, things that I don't like to do. I might be considered a personality type. But I think when we're talking about our personality types, we have to kind of look at it ourselves as a whole, and that's what I say. You may identify as multiple of these personality types, but it's just a starting point for you to better understand yourself. And it's good that you recognize that, because that's a good first step. Now Austin knows that, okay, if I'm doing this, which is something I really like, I don't know if you're the same as me, I'm just using me as an example, but doing something I really like, sure, I'm going to be a firefighter. If I'm doing something that I hate or I am not good at, maybe, I'm going to be a procrastinator. But that's a really good observation, and it's a good way for you to personally identify your personality type and to make some efforts to improve on those. Your personality type, we all have, there's positive and negative attributes to all of them, right? And it's not like one personality type is the right one to be. It's just who we are, and it's just a better way for us to understand ourselves and understand why we do things the way we do them and improve ourselves. But yes, you are correct. There's definitely times when, depending on what you're doing, you may identify as a different personality type. I see what you're saying. Gaetano, you're going to have to delegate that, man. I can't, but like you said, man, you can delegate anything. Any other questions, comments? All right, well, it's 2:54, so it's supposed to be an hour long. That was perfect. Thank y'all for coming, hanging out with us today, and I hope everybody has a good week, and I will see you all later.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, Daniel.